It's me again, Trina, the Southeast Asia Teaching Fellow for Google News Lab. Welcome to Google News Initiative's APAC Youth Verification Challenge, a campaign that lets youth learn how to fact check, mingle with other like-minded peers, like how you're chatting on the chat box right now, and also meet professional fact checkers. Today marks the third session for Chapter 2, Meet the Legends. A few housekeeping notes for those who missed the earlier sessions. We will be throwing random questions during the presentation. You can respond on chat with your answer and registered nickname in brackets. We will only award points to the top 3 participants who answer correctly and fastest for each question. Swag will be given out to those who attended all 4 sessions for Chapter 2 and responded to the questions on chat. Now, if you have any questions for our guest speakers today, please type it in your question at the bottom of the video under the Ask a Question box. I'm very excited for this evening's guests because they're both incredibly special. And I say special because they are both professional fact checkers and also university students. This means that they're young enough to join the verification challenge, unlike me here, who is way very much over age. If you're wondering how someone who is your peer is part-timing as a professional fact checker, look no further because I'll now call upon Areta and Anne to share their work and experience as fact checkers for Annie Lab.
Thank you, Trina, for the introduction. And my partner Anne here and I are very excited to introduce you all to Annie Lab. Just to give everybody some basic facts, Annie Lab is a university project which is located on campus and part of the HKU journalism program. All reporters here at Annie Lab are students, and earlier this year we were granted the ISCN certification as well. But before we go on more about Annie Lab, we just wanted to introduce ourselves very quickly. And we're actually closer in age to a lot of you listening than you'd expect. I just finished my 4th year of the HKU journalism program, and I was with Annie Lab for around 4 months last year, when I took part in a related course which teaches fact-checking and allows students to work in a real newsroom setting. I first decided to join because I was quite interested in fact-checking, as I thought that it would be a useful skill to acquire both in terms of journalism and real-world application. I also believed that the entire structure would be a great way to gain practical experience. For the actual course itself, apart from weekly classes, we are able to choose from morning and afternoon shifts each day to work at the newsroom. And most of our time involves monitoring as well as working on stories that we've pitched.
Hi, I'm another speaker. My name is Anne. I just finished my work with Annie Lab earlier this month, and I'm going to graduate from my bachelor degree in journalism soon. So similar to Areta, I worked for Annie Lab for roughly 4 months. I decided to join Annie Lab because some of my classmates, including Areta, recommend this course to me, and also my ex-colleagues at NBC News that what Annie Lab do is actually similar to what social news gathering team in NBC do. So given I have somehow like similar prior experience, I feel like I can handle the workload in Annie Lab too. So during our news shift, we have to pitch our own stories. Most of the time, we have to search for the story ideas from various social media platforms like Facebook and Twitter. And actually, through Lab, I realized how important fact checking is, especially after the outbreak of war between Ukraine and Russia. There were a lot of misinformation and fake claims targeting Ukraine. We saw the patterns and how some old pictures or videos kept on being misused to mislead people in order to justify Russia invasion. So misinformation is not always about defamation, but sometimes it can be used as a political tool as well. So that's why fact checking is so important nowadays.
Although Annie Lab started in 2019, student-driven fact-checking in the journalism program has been around since 2014, where it was previously called the Cyber Verification Lab, which later turned into Annie Lab. Hence, the HKU program has actually been teaching fact-checking for a long time. Faculty members here are involved as editors, and the lab runs from Monday to Friday. So even though it's part of a course, Annie Lab also functions as a normal newsroom itself. I personally joined before AniLab got verified by IFCN, but seeing them getting recognized, I feel like our hard work has been validated, and I think it will inspire future student reporters here to maintain high standards as well as continuing honing their skills. And because we're working with them now, we collaborate with other fact checking organizations on major news events. For example, we previously joined the COVID Facts Project, and we're now part of the Ukraine Facts Project. All of our work contributes to a global database used by organizations such as WHO, which is searchable by everybody on the internet.
So the director of AniLab is Dr. Kajimoto Masato, and we have two editors who are veteran journalists. Since 2019, about 60 students have joined the newsroom so far, excluding one of guest students from other courses and projects. But the number of student reporters fluctuates each time period. Students can choose to participate in AniLab in either semester 1 or 2, or even during summer as their internship. Our newsroom is relatively small, so we try to work as a small team. Even there's a lot of reporters that year, our editors will try to spread the students out into smaller groups. As we have less people, it also means that each of us have more workload. So we might not be able to do many stories. But meanwhile, we have to meet IFCN standards to publish 2 fact-checking stories per week. So it was a bit challenging for us, but it's a great opportunity for students to work under pressure because it's like in real life newsroom. So even though AniLab is kind of like a student project, we aim to be as professional as we possibly can. Apart from local or China-based events, we also work on international news stories. Oftentimes, we have to compete with real news organizations. And in fact, we are sometimes even faster than much bigger organizations in terms of publishing stories. So for example, the story on Greta Thunberg's alleged weight gain was debunked by AniLab in April last year. So AFP debunked the same claims 4 days later than us. We also debunked the claim of some Burmese burning a Sino-Myanmar pipeline in March last year. AFP published their fact-checking report in April, almost a month later than us. We also debunked a claim about this photo. So some people claim that this photo shows some Afghans waiting for a plane during the evacuation, but it's actually a photography artwork, have nothing to do about the evacuations. We published the story in English and Chinese in August last year, and Taiwan Fact Check Center published their fact-checking story on the same claim a month later than us. So recently, we also debunked a fake photo related to Thailand in March this year. So someone manipulated the photo to show Putin holding a Thai king picture, maybe used as a propaganda for the Thai royal family. So BBC Thailand ended up republishing our story.
So now we've arrived at the first question of today's session. Basically, when was AniLab established and which university program is AniLab associated with? So just type the answer in the chat box below, and we'll be moving on to the next section. I now want to share an actual case study I worked on last year, and this was quite memorable for me because it was one of the first big stories I worked on. Part of our jobs is monitoring social media, so I came across this particular post on Twitter, and it's quite a shocking piece on first glance, hence I'm not going to show the actual video. And there is a translation of the caption here on the PowerPoint, but basically it claims that this video of a man falling out of a building was a forced suicide orchestrated by the CCP, and that is tied to a larger conspiracy surrounding forced suicides of CCP party members that is also spread in Macau and Hong Kong. So why is it relevant? This is mostly in relation to the metrics. The video had been viewed close to 160,000 times, so it was starting to circulate widely online, especially in Chinese-speaking circles within Twitter. A lot of the comments also believed it happened in China, meaning that it's potentially contributing to the misunderstanding of current social issues. But when I saw it, the building didn't look like it was in China, and our eventual investigation shows that it has nothing to do with the above claim. And the process is much more straightforward than you'd think, using some of the tools that you've probably encountered if you were here for chapter 1 of this challenge. So to figure out where the video was from, I employed the use of reverse video search, more specifically invid. So taking the Twitter link, I plugged it into the keyframe function of invid, which for those of you who don't know, searches images taken from the video on Google for a match and tries to look for its origin. It soon gave me a result for a Russian news site, which uploaded the video on its page, and the location marker at the top right corner of this video places it in Kogalym, Russia. So with this news site, it credited the video to the social media platform VK. And with that, I was able to pinpoint the first known appearance of it in a VK group created for people living in Kogalym. With knowledge of the source and location, I then used the Russian keywords I found from the video and looked them up on Google, making sure to set the time range to match that of the dates found previously. And soon I found a lot of Russian news articles detailing the incident being captured in the video, and it was nothing to do with suicide. In actuality, a 26-year-old man was allegedly pushed by his 56-year-old companion. The younger man lost his balance and fell down, hitting the air conditioning unit in the process. Both of them were suspected to have consumed alcoholic beverages prior to the fall, and the younger man was injured, not dead. Some news reports quoted the press service of the Russian Ministry of Internal Affairs for the Khanty-Mansi region, so confirming that the incident happened the day before the video was uploaded. At this stage, there is a lot of proof showing that the incident happened in Russia. But since the claim involves politics, our team wanted to be sure what we put out is 100% accurate. Hence, they set out to find more proof that could solidify this debunk. And the logical next step for me was to try and geolocate the building shown in the video through Google Street View, just based on the clues from news sources and the imagery obtained from sections of the original clip. And this process was the hardest part of the entire fact check. One, due to the fact that I only had the general district, but not a specific location, which actually ended up being a rather large area to canvass. And also because a lot of the streets in that region looked the same. So I had to go through all the buildings within the possible radius and try to match them with the details I had gathered. Eventually, I located an apartment complex almost identical to the building in the video, where a comparison was then made to verify details of specific parts. So here you can see a comparison picture that I created. One of the limitations is that the latest street view from Google actually was 2013, which is quite a while ago. So it's understandable that when placed side by side, the two photographs will not be exactly the same. But given the similarities in features despite the long time gap, it was very likely that this was the building where the incident occurred. The official Gazette of Russia, which is a newspaper published by the Russian government, also reported that the incident occurred on the same street we found on Google Maps. So through the use of these simple tools and all the information gathered, I was able to debunk the original tweet and publish the story. And I think it goes to show that fact-checking is very much tied to social media and has real-world applications. It serves as a very good reminder that there's much more fake news than you'd expect in applications or websites that you probably use daily without much thought. So it's always a good idea to be wary of what you see online, and that simple resources like what's been covered in Chapter 1 are enough to reveal the truth about viral news and protect you against misinformation. Now we are moving on to the second question of the session, which is on what social media platform was the out-of-context video found? And if there's no issues with this, I will let Anne share another story that she worked on.
Thanks, Areta. So one of my most unforgettable fact-checking piece I work for AnyLab is actually related to this picture. So I want to ask you guys, if you see this picture on social media and someone is telling you that this picture is the real cover for one of the issues of The Economist, will you believe it or not? So my instinct told me that this picture is created by someone else using pictures from iStock or from Getty Image. So I found out the date in this so-called real cover and found out the real cover for the June 5th edition. Since this misinformation was circulating on Twitter around late March, so I also look up for the real cover for that week. So similar theme, but obviously different pictures, right? We were even able to find out the sources of each picture through reverse image search, and we recreate the so-called cover. But then our tutor purpose wanted to confirm it with someone from The Economist. Well, it doesn't really hurt to ask someone for confirmation, no matter as a fact checker or journalist. It's always the best to reach out to someone related to your story, even though that person might not be willing to answer our questions. So our tutor reached out to this journalist from The Economist, and fortunately, he answered our questions. So it turns out that the picture is one of the drafts of The Economist March issue. He sent us a link to a Economist newsletter for subscribers. So it turns out The Economist let its subscribers to know the draft cover that don't get chosen that week, and explain why that particular picture is used as the cover for that week. The editor explained that the topic for that month is actually about the relationship between China and Russia, especially during the Russia-Ukraine war. And the economists think that the overlapping phase is better to represent the relationship between these two countries. So this story is definitely one of my most unforgettable pieces, not just because we found out that we were kind of in the wrong direction in the beginning, but we were able to find out the truth at the end. But I did learn something from the story. Like, for example, the economists have several drafts or some mock-up for their cover, and they do send them to their subscribers. But most importantly, I realized that like sometimes fact and truth might be something unexpected. So what we need to do is to dig up as many information as we can and try to be neutral and unbiased as possible. So here comes the last question. So the graphic featuring Putin riding a panda was actually a parody published by the Onion, the actual cover of The Economist June 2021 issue, C, photoshopped by a Twitter user for fun, D, and unused mockup created for The Economist June issue. So please type your answer in the chat box. So that's the end for our presentation, and you can look up for our latest stories through the link here. And you can also follow our social media accounts on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Thank you.
Thanks, Anne and Areta, for sharing your work. It's really amazing how a student initiative went all the way to earn the ISCN accreditation, which really speaks a lot about the quality of work and professionalism displayed by AnyLab. Now, if you're wondering what ISCN is, you can Google it up, and it's just basically an accreditation granted to fact-checking organizations that have a proven track record and is free of bias. Now, we've got some questions coming in already, so I'll just pick out the first one. It says that, okay, if a post says this prominent person made this statement, do fact checkers just ensure if this statement was made, or do they try to check the veracity of the statement too? I'm not sure if you guys have had the opportunity to fact check statements, but if you do, then perhaps you can share what is the process like, what is the workflow like when this happens?
So at AnyLab, we check both. So if the statement was really made by the prominent person, then we check the veracity of the statement as well. But if we can prove that the prominent person didn't say that, then that's already enough for us to debunk the claim. And for me, I actually do remember a story where there was a quite misleading tweet which pulled a section of a clip from an FDA panel deliberation. And so those experts were actually medical professionals, and they actually said those statements in a real deliberation, but then it was highly out of context. So we ended up having to go through the entire probably 4 or 5 hour long deliberation in order to make sense of what was the actual context behind it and why it was misleading for people on social media. So yes, at AniLab we make sure to check both, and yep.
So it does sound like sometimes it can become a very time-consuming work, which brings us to the next question, the second question. I'm sure since it's so time-consuming, right? As a student, how do you then, was it difficult for you to keep up with fact-checking, or was this part of a curriculum? I guess the real question is, how do you really juggle?
Yeah, let me answer this question. Well, so actually, AnyLab is kind of like part of our program, but I would say it would be a difficult one because we have a lot of news shift, plus we have an additional lecture. So it takes more time than other courses, but definitely we learn more from AnyLab because we have more like real life newsroom experience. Yeah, but because journalism is always or fact checking is always about working under the time pressure and stuff. So it's a great opportunity for us to find a balance. Like we have different way to find a balance between like studying and do the fact checking. So yeah, so end up like each student will find a way to do the balance, like do the time management thing.
So another question, it says here, the fourth one: have you ever encountered a story that is so bizarre but later found out that it was actually real?
There is actually one story that I can remember off the top of my head. And so there was this actually a bunch of videos circulating on Twitter of some protesters, I believe that was in the Netherlands. And it showed a lot of people just dancing on the street and partying and having a rave in the middle of a what they alleged to be a COVID protest. And so when we first saw that video, we thought that there was no way this was really happening. There's no way that people would be partying during a protest. And after doing some research online, it turned out to be a true event that was deliberately organized, and it was a large-scale event that took place in multiple cities across the Netherlands. So that did come as quite a shock to us, but then we were eventually able to verify that that video was in fact true.
Right. I'm not sure if you guys did any work on the MU5375 crash. Did any of you did any work on that? No.
I don't think so, but I actually want to answer question 6. So,
Right.
yeah, so question 6 is about how we actually build up our own reputation so that we can be more credible when fact checking others. So, actually, not just AnyLab, but other credible news organizations, they actually have a very strict guidelines that every fact checkers and journalists have to follow so that we can keep up with our work with a very high standard to make people feel like it's trustworthy. So because we actually have to build on our credibility is actually built on our our reputation is actually built on our credibility, and our credibility is actually built by us following this kind of strict guidelines, like how we verify this each claim, and how we cite the sources, how we explain to our readers how we actually end up finding out this claim, this picture is fake, is manipulated. So yeah, it's actually but reputation also we have to build reputation through time as well. So I would say like we have to be like we have to follow the strict guidelines, but we have to build our reputation and credibility through time as well.
Right, and there's a seventh question here. It says that what were your parents' reactions when you started doing fact checking?
Well, for me, I don't think I really shared that much information. I did tell them that I was working at AnyLab and that I was doing fact checking, but they didn't really have a great reaction to it, nor were they exactly interested in what I was doing. But personally, I do think it's definitely worth it because not only is it helping me hone my personal skills, I'm also doing something that's benefiting the wider community. And you are true in pointing out that fact checking can be risky and sometimes, especially if we're touching upon more sensitive subjects or political matters. But AnyLab and the team are very aware of this risk. If necessary, we go anonymous to make sure that we are not going to get targeted or that we can stay safe. But I think the work that we're doing and what we're putting out is well worth the risks that are involved with fact checking.
Right. What about you, Anne? Like, what were your parents' reaction?
I actually didn't tell my parents, but I guess but I guess they would be fine because I mean, fact checking is part of journalism, and they know it since day one. I picked journalism as one of my majors, so yeah, I guess they will be fine.
Right. I guess a lot of people are wondering, how do I even get into this, right? Because not everyone has the opportunity to have a campus initiative, that is like AnyLab. So, like, what advice would you give to those who are around your age who are wondering, like, I'm not a student in Hong Kong University. How do I actually get into this? Do you have any advice for them?
So I am aware that many news organizations nowadays have dedicated fact-checking teams. Well, using Hong Kong as an example, at least here, learning the skills at university would help at getting an internship and job at AnyLab, as we are quite known in the Hong Kong market. I'm sure that other organizations also offer internships or part-time positions for people who are willing to learn about fact-checking and are interested in pursuing this as a future career.
Right, and I guess another question is, because you said that you source your own content to fact check, right? And I guess a lot of people are wondering, where do you really find this? Is Twitter the only platform, or where else do you look for content to fact check?
Sometimes we look at from Facebook, Weibo, and also Instagram. But I guess Twitter is more convenient in the sense because it just show any post that it just show any post. But for Facebook and Instagram, it might be tricky to find all the posts. Yeah, so we so most of our stories are actually from Twitter, I guess. Yeah.
And I think since we're based in Hong Kong, we also look at a lot of Chinese social media like Weibo, Douyin, also maybe more international sites that not everybody uses, but there's a lot of fake news on it, such as Getter. And so we do look into a variety of websites and sources to see what we can fact check and can work into a new story for that week.
And there's this other question on, what are some of the rising trends that you see in fact checking? Are there any like methods or techniques used to create fakes? Is it becoming harder to distinguish what's fake and what's real?
I think from my experience, most of in terms of the images and videos, most of them are either repurposed, meaning that people just repost it with different captions every time, or I think not a lot of them are really exactly high quality. So I think in terms of media content, it's still relatively easy for us to fact check. But then there are also people nowadays who pose as legitimate fact checkers or experts who spew out misinformation especially on Twitter or Facebook or major platforms. And that is something we need to be wary of. And it means that we really have to do much bigger background checks to make sure that people who are speaking about professional topics actually know what they're talking about.
Right. I'll just wrap up with one last question, and this question is my own because I noticed that that a lot of the participants today, even they are on Discord. I know Discord is very trendy among young people nowadays, and they even started their own Discord group for this. So, do you use Discord as a platform for you to just to pick out what's going on as well? Is that part of the news monitoring process?
I would say that's not a major focus that any lab is working on, but I personally do use Discord as well, and I interact with people there a lot. And I do understand that there is a growing number of misinformation and fake news that is circulating around the internet, in Discord, especially scams as well. So that is something that our team is wary of as well. And we are probably looking to expand into canvassing Discord for fake news as well in the future. Oh, and
Right.
I think we are also part of a newer initiative now on Discord, but that's still in its earlier phases. It's quite recent, so it's still being developed. And we are looking to have more promotional or collaborative efforts with the platform to ensure that we can catch this fake news and also just protect people and let them know about the misinformation that is circulating in Discord and on Discord.
Right. Thank you so much for your time. It's time to wrap up and call it a night. So thank you to both Anne and Areta for spending time with us today. I hope their sharing inspired all of you here today to also take action. You're all never too young to be good at fact checking. Anne and Areta have proven that you can juggle both studies and fact check professionally. So we still have one more session left for chapter 2. So we'll see each other for one last time next week. Same time, same place with our very last guest, after which we'll take a summer break and be back for chapter 3. See you all and good night. Bye.